All right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass Podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk about men, why they're afraid to take action, why we have such problems in the workforce, basically, kind of the whole mindset of what it is to be a man and why we're very different than we used to be 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago. It's funny when I think of the 50s, I'm always like, yeah, like 50 years ago. And I'm like, oh, yeah, it's not that long
It's
anymore.
not the same thing anymore.
um, with the intro, I tried to
50
think
years
of
ago 50 years ago,
exactly.
people were wearing, had perms and were wearing bell bottoms, so I don't know if
Oh,
that's that's the go-to anymore for a man.
yeah, exactly. It's bad. I was actually looking at the shoot the intro, and I was like, what's the most terrifying thing I can put in there? And I was like, freaking Jack in the Box. No,
Yeah,
I
I almost
spared.
ran for it when I saw
Right,
that
exactly.
thing pop up.
Exactly. I was like, well, if it goes with the theme song and it pops right at the end, at least you won't be, too terrified. It's
Uh,
because it's always like random, like a good
you
one
never
is
know when
you
it's gonna
never, oh, that shit just, terrifying. I'm just saying. So, anyway, not a thing. Um, so basically, we have a lot going on in the world, and it just seems like men are not the same, and that whole traditional sense of men being the provider, or the go-to who's going to take care of people and really help somebody out, it's not there anymore. I think it kind of came with feminism and equal rights, but I also feel like the schools, and I don't think it's just equal rights. I think that's an excuse. I think that the schools have really tried to shape what society is. There's really a push for people to kind of just obey, like
Mhm.
you
Right.
will obey, and you're going to learn that. And we're kind of conditioned to that. And we
I mean,
really
that's
let,
basically how,
yeah,
school works, the first 17 years of your life that you're taught that lesson over and over again.
exactly. And that's kind of the thing is we get so conditioned, and it's all about just conforming and doing what you're told. Obviously parents aren't, in order to survive you have to work a lot, which it's funny because we're going to talk about some people who aren't out there working later in the episode, but a lot of the parents are out there working all the time and they can't be at home raising their kids. And so what ends up happening is the school ends up raising the kids. Or
Right.
sometimes like the grandparents and stuff. But even with that, the grandparents a lot of time are exhausted. And from we've already been handling life,
Yeah, there's no
they're
there's no,
done.
comparison from a 2-year-old to a 72-year-old. That energy level doesn't match up.
Yeah, it's not easy. Um, so all right. So one of the things that really first struck me early on, and this is years back, going back 20 years, right? On September 11th in 2001, when they were on that plane and people didn't take action. Now we can talk about in Pennsylvania, where they overpowered the crew and took down the
Mhm.
plane, and that's great. But why did all the men on the plane let hijackers crash a plane into the World Trade Towers?
Yeah.
Now, there's answers for that. It's not, I'm not saying those guys were wrong. Well, I mean, the end result, more
Right.
action would have changed, but why was the mindset there? And there was the mindset of people all the time. And I feel like then at that time, maybe my mindset would have been the same as them. Like,
Hmm.
oh, well, nobody else is doing anything. And even if you suggest, hey, let's get together and overpower these guys, everyone else around you is going to be pulling at you, going, whoa, whoa, don't do that. You're putting us in danger, that kind of thing. And you want to be aware of what you're thinking and what we're going through as a society. So that's kind of one of the things, like, why would you sit there and not try and stop a guy hijacking a plane? Now
Right.
obviously fear is a big factor.
Hmm.
What comes to mind, Kevin? Like,
Well, I
what's
mean,
in your head?
a lot of those, previous to that, a lot of those hijackings were basically, diffused before many people got killed. A lot of the
Mhm.
times, one or two people get killed right at the beginning. You got to set an example if you're going to try and,
Right,
take over a plane.
right.
But ultimately, a lot of those people end up, being able to walk off the plane at the end of things. And
Very true.
not really the scenario anymore, though. If you think about being on a plane that's, and a lot of those previous hijackings, the hijackers were armed with firearms, right?
Yes.
On September 11th, they only had box cutters.
Right.
It's not real easy to kill somebody with a box cutter unless you get it, right up on their neck. I think they did that with a stewardess on each of those planes just to,
Okay.
terrify people. When you see that sort of thing happen, man, that's scary stuff. But you know,
Well, I think that's a valid point. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, that is definitely a consideration that, hey, they've always kind of landed the plane and then there's some kind of hostage standoff where they negotiate
hmm.
and whatever. And there is a chance that you're going to get people killed. When
Hmm.
you go and try and stop stuff, they might, well, there was a scene on Yellowstone, and like a sheriff is in a diner and he's being held at gunpoint, and they kind of go around the back to just shoot the bad guys and get the upper hand. Well, almost everybody in the diner ends up getting killed. Like, yeah, you stop the bad guys, but pretty much you kind of got everybody killed too. And that's something that goes through your head. And I think, like, the definition of a man, I mean, that's kind of something that's coming back. I think that's why, like, shows like Yellowstone are such a draw for people. Even like Sons of Anarchy was the big hit, right? Or Yellowstone, and before that The Sopranos, because these were men that actually did manly things. And I'm not talking about crime. I'm not talking about just murdering people. I think what people connect with is the take action kind of, I'm not indecisive and unsure, but I actually move forward and do what needs to be done. And I think that's really changed in our culture. People are very insecure, unsure of themselves, and question everything they do, and everything, I guess, does get questioned and rediscussed in the media and on talk shows, and there's a video of everything that ever happens. And it's different. It's definitely different than it used to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, toxic masculinity is a thing that's been pounded into our heads. Acting like a man is evil. Mansplain to people. Don't be so aggressive. Why are you so aggressive about this? And that sort of shit. It's really a bunch of horse shit. Really. You know what I mean?
Right.
The best thing you can do for your life, with every interaction, is just stand up straight, look somebody in the eye. With Have your shoulders back.
Yeah.
Be ready and be engaged. uh I deal with a couple of people that I really have a hard time getting anything done with them because they always just kind of stare at me with a blank face,
Yes.
and I'm talking to them and I can't get any kind of reaction out of them. And it's just it's not helpful for anybody. you
Right.
know
Now
just
that's it.
a timidity. Is that a word, or did I
I
just make that up?
it might be now. How about that? See,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Just go bold, Kevin. Just own it.
Hmm.
Be like, it's a word now. See, that's the difference. But I mean, to be honest, I even feel like I think one of the things, like as a prepper, is I'm constantly playing out scenarios.
Right.
And I'm like, what would I do if this happens? And I think going in and having a plan definitely shapes and changes how we react to things. And I think a lot of people don't do that. They don't even foresee possibilities or consider what might happen. And I think that gives us an advantage. Um, and also, I mean, to be honest, an advantage of not coming out like a coward.
Right.
It's like, everybody afterward, oh, I should have done something. I was watching some videos about this, and some people were talking about, oh, somebody was raped on a train in Philadelphia, and people just stood there and didn't do anything.
Hmm.
And that's insane and ridiculous, but it's what everybody did. And you're just like, how? Where people talk about, people get attacked in the street and all the people are standing in the windows in the buildings on either side and are looking out and watch it happen, but nobody calls the police.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, that's what happened with. Do you remember the O.J. Simpson case?
Okay.
That all happened. People called the police that somebody was screaming that getting murdered or sounded like somebody was being killed. There's an apartment building right across the street, and not one person looked out the window to see what
To
was going
see.
on. You know,
Wow.
and that sort of stuff. I mean, I don't know. To me, that seems ridiculous, but
It's
that's what
insane.
everybody said. They didn't look out the window. Nobody looked out to see
Well,
what was
that's
going on. And that's
yeah,
wild.
I don't know if people remember. I had mentioned one of my neighbors, was like, "Oh, well, I saw a suspicious car pull in your driveway and whatever, but I don't know what happened because I went and hid behind my couch." He really told me that, and I'm like, he's like, "Because I didn't know what to do," and I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. All
And
right.
that's the kind of world. And then, like, to me, I couldn't even comprehend what he was saying. I'm like, you saw a car in a driveway across the street and you hid
And
behind your
you
couch?
hid.
Like, that's amazing.
Mhm.
I
Right.
just can't even.
Yeah, no, that sort of stuff is just
Yeah.
wild to me. There's a lot of stuff going on though, and I hear about you nobody wants to anymore. I hear
Right.
that phrase a lot. Nobody wants to work
Right.
anymore. Um, but the truth is unemployment is low. Unemployment hasn't been this low in a long time. Uh, the pandemic, you know, unemployment was let me see here real quick. Was at 14.7% during the height of the pandemic.
Right. Like
That's
2019. Yeah.
yeah, April 2020 was
Okay.
the high point there. And that's still a lot of people working. That's
Yeah.
still a lot of people employed. That's 85% of people still showing up to their job every day. Um, and I know we were talking about back then, we were talking about like the necessary employees,
Yes.
person who works
Essential.
at that essential, right? Person that works at the grocery store, the cashier and shit, that's making $12 an hour to be there and have everyone cough in their face as they come through. Um,
Yeah.
those people that were essential are still making shit money. You know
Yeah,
what I
they
mean?
are.
They didn't increase your pay didn't increase if you work at a cash register checking out groceries. Your pay is actually pay for those jobs is going down. Inflation
Um,
is going up, and the pay is going up, but it's not keeping pace.
right.
If you look at it, uh, um, July 2022, wages went up 6.7%, and inflation went up 8.5%. And if you look at that every month going through 2022, it's the same thing.
Right.
Inflation is going up a lot faster than wages are. So effectively, you're making less money for doing the same job every month. And, why are you having a hard time attracting employees? Well, maybe because you treat them like shit and you pay them $12 an hour. Nobody wants to be treated like shit for $12 an
Well,
hour,
so I'm
you
a
know?
little worried because I thought I made good money. Now I actually live in a pretty poor area.
Hmm.
Like, and my cost of living is like obviously a lot better than your cost of living.
Right.
right? I know when I had a house next to you, I paid, I think it's like 12,000 a year in property taxes or something
It's
insane.
something ridiculous. Yep.
And now I pay like 1,400 a year in property taxes and I
Hmm.
have 8 times the amount of property. And yeah, but the 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 average manufacturing hourly rate they're saying is $31.44.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, wait a minute. I
Yeah.
feel a little left out. I'm like, what's going on here?
Mhm.
So I don't know who these people are, but apparently a lot of people are making that. There is 11 million job openings right now. So they are
Mhm.
trying to get people, but it turns out making 100 grand a year doesn't really go as far as you thought. Like in my mind, I used to be like, oh, if I could get 100 grand
That's
a
a rich
year, that
person. Yeah.
that'd be I'd be rich.
Yeah. Not the case anymore. Costs you $100,000 just to buy groceries each week.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I don't know how people are not like using credit cards and for everything. And
Yeah, well, I
and I
mean,
think they are. I mean,
that's
that's the
definitely happening. Yeah, that's definitely. They said um, money owed on credit cards has increased drastically over the past two
that's it. I
years.
haven't heard people talking about it. And that's what I'm
Hmm.
always like I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, I know what
Right.
people are making and
Hmm.
how
How
are
are they
they
even
living?
surviving? Yeah.
Especially when, people have $700 car payments and
Right.
all these things. I'm like, I can't, relate. I just
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
don't
An
know.
average rent now is somewhere around $2,000 a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is wild to me. I mean,
Uh,
2 grand a month is that would be a big chunk out of my income. You know.
right. Yeah, no, I pay less than that to own a house with property, but
Hmm.
yeah, no,
Well,
that's
I mean, that's the thing though. A lot of people can't get loans
right,
where their payment would be $1,200 a month, but
right.
they're paying rent every month for 2,000. So, you know, but I mean, really
Yeah,
owning a home is out of reach for most people these days. It used to be, in the '60s, you'd buy a house for $10,000 and you could get that paid off in 5 years. But
right.
I ain't
Or
buying shit for 10 grand now.
I should have looked up the stat, but people didn't do long mortgages for a long
Hmm.
time. That was like, and then like you said, when it started, it was like a 5 year thing. It wasn't
Right.
but a lot of people were paying cash for a house.
Hmm.
Yeah, you'd save up till you were like 30,
Right.
or whatever, but it wasn't a thing. It was you still bought a house,
Hmm.
you got there or mom and dad helped you out or whatever. It just yeah, it's crazy. But I mean, I guess there's so many people they're saying there's so many men out there that are not even in the labor force or looking. And that's one of the things with the statistics is men aren't out there even trying to get a job. And
Right.
maybe it's people, maybe it's not just men, but they're not out there looking. And it's funny. They said I was looking at the statistics, and you're thinking, oh well, maybe they're stay at home dads, right? They're
Hmm.
staying at home and raising their
Right.
babies. But believe it or not, you're more likely to be taking care of a loved one if you're a full time employee than if you're not an employee at all.
Hmm. Right. That makes. I mean, honestly, that makes sense in the sense that
You feel an
taking care of
urgency to
somebody is
go out.
expensive. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Taking care
And
of somebody is expensive. And I think a lot of people are seeing their bills going up every day, every
right.
month, every week, grocery store bills, electric bills, car payments, cars are going up, and their paycheck isn't going up. And it's frustrating for a lot of people.
It
People
is.
talk about quiet quitting, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of that stuff is, you know, for a lot of people, it just makes sense to them. You know what I mean? If your employee is only paying you enough to get you to show up,
Right.
why wouldn't you just work hard enough to not get fired? You know what I mean? It's a give and take, and it's a street that goes both ways.
Right.
If you're working for somebody though that is just paying you enough to keep you from quitting, you're working at the wrong place. You know, there's better
Yeah.
employers out there. I've worked for a lot of
Right.
people that were real shitbags. You know what I mean? Real pieces of shit that, were truly trying to take advantage of people. And, you move on, find a different job. It's not worth it for me. You know,
Yeah.
it's not worth it to be treated like trash for what you're paying me. I know a lot of people that say nobody wants to work anymore. No, nobody wants to work for you. That's 90% of those people that say that. Nobody wants to work for you because you're an asshole. People don't
Ex-
quit jobs, they quit bosses, you know?
Yeah. No, that definitely sounds right. Well, that's, I mean, the mindset. When I hear employers, when I hear my own employer, give us these meetings to inspire us. Like we had an all employee meeting the other day, and they're like, "Hey, production is way up, sales are way up, everything is way better than last year. So your bonus that you got last year, expect it to be smaller this year." And
Right.
you're like, "Wait, how
Yeah,
does
that
that
doesn't make any
work?"
sense.
That
I
doesn't.
was in a meeting yesterday, day before yesterday, and I was talking to an owner of a company, and he said, "Listen, we don't want to increase your cost. I mean, inflation has gone up 6%, and typically we would increase your cost by 6%, but that's not really fair to you because we haven't increased the employees' wages by 6%." I'm like, well, sounds like you're a dickhead, you know?
Yeah,
And you're wondering
yeah,
why you can't get enough people to work for you. Yeah, that might be
that's
the issue right there.
that was it. So at the same meeting, guys like, well, don't worry, we're expanding, we're building all this new stuff, and don't worry, even though what you do is going away, you don't have your job going away because we can't even get one employee, let alone the 50 new employees we do need over there. So
Right.
there's always jobs. And you're like, yeah, well, why is it you can't get any employees?
Hmm.
That's
Right.
and you see a lot of these employers now are willing to train and willing to do stuff. But it's funny, I talk to my kids, but it's funny because they don't. People are like, oh, they won't come work here. Well, all right, my company can't find employees. However, they demand 5 to 7 days a week at 10 hours a day.
Hmm.
And I'm
Right.
like, well, yeah, people aren't really excited about that. They don't want to be a slave to you.
Hmm. Right.
And that's the thing. It's random. Like, hey,
10
you
hours a
might have,
day, 6 days a week.
right.
That doesn't leave a whole lot of time,
And the way
time
they
for your
do it
life.
is like, hey, you might have this weekend off. We're going to let you know Friday night if you're going to be off
Right.
Saturday.
Right.
And it's like, well, yeah, that's not that cool. My
Hmm.
my schedule, like I'm in maintenance and it's different. We have, planning and we do actually a little bit better. But the rest of them, it's like it's a gamble and nobody wants to be treated like crap or like they're a slave. And that's a real thing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so why are people not going into work? Why are people not showing up? Aside of pay, there's a couple of reasons. Um, you know, a lot of people were scared to quit their jobs. They didn't know what they were going to do if they didn't have a job, and then everybody got laid off during the pandemic, and everyone realized, oh shit, I made
The
it,
world
I
didn't
survived,
end. Right.
yeah, and now maybe I can pursue something that I'm interested in a little bit more. Maybe more people are working for themselves. Um, but I don't know. I think the real issue is people are why would you work a job 6 days a week if you still can't pay your bills? Because you can not work all day and
And
also
not pay
not be
your
able to pay
bills.
your bills.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
works out.
so
But
it's one of those things. Costs keep going up, and pay is not going up, and that is an issue.
yeah. Well, that kind of circles back to the other stuff. It amazes me. It amazes me that like nobody wants to work and like not be able to pay your bills, but there's like no consequences. I
Hmm.
I have a coworker who bought all kinds of he was always about buying guns and suppressors and everything, and kind of
All
maxed out
sorts of
every
shit.
credit card and everything that he had. And he basically just was like, "Oh, I'm not going to pay my bills," and that just worked out. It just like he just
Yeah,
didn't pay
there
his
you go.
bills. And he's like, "Yeah, come get the stuff." And they're like, "Well, you have to do a bankruptcy and this and that." And he's like, "Nah, I don't want to do that."
Yeah.
And
If you're gonna
just,
declare bankruptcy, you might as well run up all your credit cards before you do, right?
yeah, that sounds right. But he didn't even bother. He's just like, "Whatever, I'm just not going to pay you." And
Hmm.
it turns out he's still alive and not in
Still,
jail and
still
just
has
kind of
most of his
goes on.
stuff.
Now, so there's no consequences to things like that, but we have fear of like consequences of all these other things that we do. And
Hmm.
that goes back to that scared to act. We're
Right.
talking about, um, if you see like a policeman, right, getting beat up, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I don't want to go help him because I might get in trouble."
Right.
And that's the craziest thing, but I can understand. Like that kind of goes through your head. Like,
Right.
well, is he just going to yell at me, "Get out of here, I'm a professional," and whatever, as he's getting his ass kicked, or,
Hmm.
another cop might come up and shoot you because,
Yeah.
who knows?
Well, I mean that happened not that long ago. Somebody
Okay.
stopped an active shooter and then got shot by the
Yeah,
cops when the cops
that
showed up.
sounds right. Uh,
So I mean, stuff like that does happen, and those are the stories that scare people. You know what I mean? That's not the standard. That's not what generally
yeah.
happens. That's one example, and it's anecdotal. But you hear those stories, and you think that it's going to happen to you. Somebody breaks into your house and tries to attack you, and you shoot them. You just committed murder. You know what I mean? You have
Yeah.
to you have to you know defend yourself. You're
Right.
going to have to get a lawyer, but
There's money and consequences. Exactly.
it's better than getting your ass beat and have all your stuff stolen.
And being a
Uh,
coward your whole life. You have to live with yourself. That's
right,
kind of,
exactly. I mean, those sorts of things. Those sorts of things. Everybody wants you to act appropriately and legally, and kindly, but that's not really what every situation calls for. You know, being a man means knowing when to act. Acting. Acting appropriately is something that when everything's illegal, it gets tricky to do anything that's anywhere and in any way aggressive, right? You get worried about that sort of stuff. Everybody's screaming about toxic masculinity and
right.
mansplaining and all that sort of stuff, but nobody talks about toxic femininity. You know what I mean? That sort
No,
of
that's
that
not
sort
a
of
thing.
uh, that sort of behavior is not appropriate for men, and you know just fucking grow a spine. Shit. Sometimes it worries me about that sort of stuff. And, you know, a lot of people aren't going to college anymore. Um, they say the average cost, if you take out loans and pay them back with the interest, the average cost of a bachelor's degree is $500,000,
Wow,
more than
that's
half a million
insane, huh?
dollars, which is insane. You're not going to make that in 10 years. Even with the bachelor's degree, even if you don't, even if you don't have a house that you live in that you pay for and don't pay for food or don't pay for anything, don't have a car payment or anything like that,
Yeah.
those that sort of cost is insane. And honestly, if I was a teenager right now or had a teenage kid in my house, I'd encourage them to go learn a trade, become a
Yeah.
plumber,
All
a
day,
carpenter, an
right?
electrician. Those are the jobs that pay, and it's not going to cost you a fortune to learn how to do it. So, those things are crazy. Now, if you are looking for a job,
Yeah,
I've
you
got
have
some
one.
a pointer here.
All
I've
right,
got
what do
a
you got?
so if you're looking for a job, ideally the best name you can have is Tanner.
Okay.
The worst name you can have is Demetrius. So if
Really?
you're applying for jobs and your name is Demetrius, change
You
that
might
name,
want to
man.
change your name? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you
Go with
got to
the
be
middle name or something.
white upper class, change it to Piper or
Okay.
something like that. Connor,
Piper. Is
Piper,
Piper
Connor,
a white
Tanner.
upper class name? I'm not sure it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, people are naming boys that. It's crazy.
Really?
Wild stuff, man, but
All right.
whatever. I feel like I've met two Connors in my life, and I they had really punchable faces, both of them.
Yeah.
So just putting it out there. I don't know if the name has anything to do with it, but
But you did want to punch him. We can
yeah,
confirm that.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, then
Okay.
again, somebody did tell me yesterday that I had a very punchable face, which fair enough.
You know,
I'll
when I
give you
was a
that.
kid, my grandmother did say, every time I look at you, I want to hit you as hard as I can. So,
That's something, right? Yeah,
punchable face right there.
right there.
I know if you ask my wife on occasion, she might be
She
down
thinks
for a
about it.
punch in the face, you know?
Uh huh.
So, you know, to each their own. It
Yeah.
turns out, I don't know. It's an ugly world. That's what I can tell you. But it's amazing to me that we are so conditioned. I think it comes from there's no people don't have purpose, right? And when
Hmm.
you don't have purpose, I feel like you don't have anything to defend. A lot of people, I mean, I don't want to just blame like social media or that kind of stuff, but people are always looking for just a distraction. Um, and I guess, I mean, work can be a distraction, right? I mean, you can just, oh, I'm not thinking about life because I just go do
Go
my
to work, come
nonsense
home, go to
distraction
work.
thing.
Yep.
So there's something, you could make an argument back at me. I'm not saying that things are blind and absolute, right? But people will just stare at nothing or watch a TV series or just go through, tons of stuff like that. And, you know, that's something to do, but eh, I don't know. You want something productive where you have something at the end, right?
Hmm.
That's my point. You want to build up to something, and that's kind of what gives you purpose. Now maybe making your kid into something amazing is your purpose. And
Hmm.
that's okay. And people can get real fulfillment from that. You
Right.
know, providing for your family by going to work nonstop and working 20 hours straight doing tons of overtime. That's the thing
That can be fulfilling for people.
that can
Yeah.
be fulfilling because you're like, hey, now my house is paid off. Or now, whatever, after, 20 years or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever it takes, maybe you buy a more modest house and maybe your house is paid off in 2 years because you're, doing ridiculous overtime and you take advantage of that. Because in theory, right, you're making 100 grand a year, you buy a $60,000 house,
Hmm.
then that's a possible thing, right? You live within your means. Some people do things like that, right? But it turns out kids want to eat all the time, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're saying, right?
Yeah.
The kids got to eat. So maybe don't have babies, right? Maybe that's the thing. I
Well, I
don't
mean, that
know.
is that is a thing that's happening in the United States. Our population is decreasing because people aren't having babies because they're fucking expensive. You know what I
Oh,
mean?
they're
You don't
brutal.
want to act like nobody says that kids are cheap, but you know there's a serious time investment in children
Time and money in
and a money
children. Yeah.
investment, right? You can ignore your kids all the time, but
Yeah.
they're gonna.
A lot of people do that.
A lot of people do that, but that's not ideal, and
A tablet or an iPhone is the babysitter.
takes care of it, right? Just get put a tablet in front of that kid, and they'll take care of themselves. Let TV teach them, you know.
And
And
I
and
think, yeah,
I
go ahead.
know a lot of people freaked out during the pandemic because now their kids were at home all day. They didn't have a babysitter, and how can you go to work if your 7-year-old's at the house all day, right?
Yeah.
Uh, a lot of people got had issues with that sort of stuff, and we treat schools like babysitters, right? We expect them to take care of them, and the truth of the matter is, God knows what your kid's learning at school. Learning about you know transsexual teddy bears. I saw a book about that not too long
Oh,
ago. Um, but at the same time, we worry about what the schools are teaching our kids. But then they come home, we stick them in front of the TV or in front of the tablet, and it's 10 times worse than anything that they'll learn in school. You know, how long is it before your 6 year old figures out how to spell boobs and starts
Ooh.
searching that on Google? That can end bad.
Yep, exactly. No, that's it. Kids want to eat, they just freaking they stay, it can be expensive. That's what it comes down to. I know with my boys, I just told them, look, you can't bring a girl home and be having sex in my house. That's not going to fly. And once kind of made it really difficult, they were like, I gotta move out. And
Yeah.
they just never came back. They're like, no, that's not going to work. You do what you got to do, right?
Right.
Um, but yeah, it turns out that didn't work with girls, though. I'm just saying, putting that out there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They don't
Girls,
care.
I was like, yeah,
They go to their boyfriend's
you
house. Their
can't bring
boyfriend had to
boys
move
here.
out.
And they're like, whatever. I got a
Yeah.
car. I can go somewhere or whatever. I don't know what they do, but yeah, you got to keep feeding them. And this whole healthcare till 26 somehow.
Mm,
But what gets me even more is you're responsible to pay your kids healthcare till they're 26, but you can't like say, I want to go into the doctor and figure out what's going on. No, whoa, the privacy, that's not
right.
your business.
Right.
And the bills come and are like, they withhold the name of the doctor. And you're
Hmm.
like, well, I don't even know what this bill is. Well, how do I know
Right.
if it's right? And
Yeah.
they're like, oh, just keep paying, don't worry about it. Just shut
But
up and do what you're
parents going
told.
in with their kid to the doctor has had negative repercussions. There was a long time where they thought syphilis could be uh, transmitted via toilet seat because all these girls
Yes.
were getting syphilis, and mom said they never had sex before, and mom's sitting there
And
right next
they
to the doctor,
and the
and
girl's
right
like,
next
yep,
to her. Yeah,
mom, yep, you're
you're
right.
right. I'm still a virgin. I don't know how I got the syphilis, but whatever. It all works.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's definitely a thing. I I don't know. No, I mean 100%. I don't want to be going in with the kid or whatever. I'm just saying it's just weird that you're paying bills that you have no, say or
Right.
authority
Exactly.
over, right?
Hmm.
And you can just kind of keep going and it's crazy.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah. Well, I think that a lot of people are resigning themselves to living in a boring dystopia. They see the world
yeah.
and they see the jobs that are being offered to them, but a lot of the times you just have to make your own way. You know what I mean? You have to m- you know make your decide what it is you want from life and go after that, and maybe that involves going to work for 60 hours a week so you can make money and get things started. Maybe it means working two jobs. Maybe it means really having to hustle.
Right.
But you know it all depends on what you're trying to get out of life. And a lot of people are they look around themselves, they look at their parents, they look at their friends, their neighbors, and they see a lot of depressed people that are miserable with their jobs. So why would I want to get a job if you know everybody's hates the job they have, you know?
Right.
And it's your responsibility, and it's my responsibility to make sure these guys these kids can see a brighter future, you know?
Right.
They look back, and when grandma and grandpa could buy a house for 10 grand, and when they could go to college for $8,000 for a 4-year degree,
Right.
and now the ocean's on fire and all the boomers are dying off, and everything's going to shit, and it gets depressing.
Yeah.
It's depressing for a lot of these kids. you
No,
know
no doubt. No, and that's the thing. I think, like, if you watch the news, the world's always ending and whatever. It's funny whenever I used to be the big news junkie because I was out on the road in a, work van all day long, driving from house to house doing repairs. And so I'd listen to talk radio or whatever, the audiobooks get expensive. I still do a fair amount of audiobooks, but
Hmm.
that kind of thing. You needed the distraction or whatever, and it felt like the world was ending every other day. And it turns out, if you just shut the news off, it's not that bad.
Yeah,
You
life
know,
is life is pretty good.
life goes on for you. And I'm not saying, don't vote, don't waste your time. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying it turns out you can figure out what's going on in about 10 minutes when you
Hmm.
kind of look at things,
Right,
talk to some people. You
and
don't
then
need to let
disengage.
it consume you, left and right. The only
Yeah,
thing I would say, like as a prepper, there is an advantage to having your finger on the pulse of society, that
right.
you kind of can foresee when things are coming. um
Hmm.
I mean, to be honest, that Chinese balloon situation, it could have been a real threat.
Right.
um uh, it was bigger, that payload, than people understand. They said it was several buses long, that payload. It
Hmm.
wasn't nothing.
Right.
Right? They could have, when they describe how EMP's balloon height is the right thing for that. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a real thing. It was insane to let that get into the middle of our country. And as a prepper, that's something that you should be like, hey, I need to make sure I got my stuff in order, and honestly, that I'm not too far away from my house, because things could go bad.
Yeah.
um eh, I'm not trying to spread fear and paranoia. That's not my point. My point is, you pay attention to things going on, because it kind of, you know it can affect the outcome. When stock markets are plummeting or doing anything, you need to be aware. Hey, maybe things are going to go bad. Hey, things are really picking up with this coronavirus thing back in the day, and maybe I'm going to run out of toilet paper, like whatever.
Right.
You can kind of be aware of what's going on. Hey, look, I see beef shortages, or hey, you know, but paying attention and knowing what's going on definitely have, a an effect on what we do. And you just need to kind of be aware. But my point is, don't let it consume you and overwhelm you,
Yeah.
and maybe take it with a grain of salt, and maybe, give your time that you're willing to give. Don't commit to everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, I know that, for me personally, I'm a news junkie. I'm
All right.
always listening to the news, always watching the news. I'm flipping, through all the stations, Fox, MSNBC,
Yeah.
CNN, every station, every angle, trying to get it all in because I've been prepping all this time and I'm waiting for the collapse. If that balloon had a nuclear payload on it and it detonated at that height over Colorado, it could have shut down power for a large portion of the United States. Um, the anytime the nuclear bomb detonates, it sends out an electromagnetic pulse, right? And it fries all the smaller circuits. Your phone's going to be dead, your car is going to be dead. The lights in your house aren't going to come on anymore. Those are the things that people are unaware of. The danger, the real danger of some sort of catastrophe that you didn't even see coming. You know what I mean? We barely even know about that balloon before the fucking TV goes
Yeah.
off and the radio goes off, and then we have no idea what's going on.
Right.
And those are the sorts of things, those are the sorts of threats um, that people don't consider. And obviously, you're not going to set off a nuclear bomb over the United States. It's not going to work out well for you. But it's not going to wouldn't work out for us either. And you wonder why America has such shit healthcare. Well, that's because we can, you know, roll an army into any other country in the world a drop of a hat. That's where we're putting our money. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um,
Well,
you wanna
the
worry
whole
about that sort of stuff,
system's
then
yeah,
you know,
the whole system with healthcare. There's so much overhead. It's funny. I was so excited when you started seeing like the urgent cares pop up, because the majority of them were like kind of cash operations. Like you walk in, you pay $150, you get your doctor visit, and that's what it is. And like
Right.
insurance was kind of irrelevant. And now they're kind of like more and more like mini hospitals. You know what I'm saying? Like now it's kind of really getting back into that insurance nonsense game and not,
Hmm.
the other way. I don't really go to the doctor enough to really know, but I know I've done urgent care early on and it was like, oh, no insurance, no problem, $150, whatever, you're good. And
Right.
the thing is, I used to have a buddy who was a chiropractor and he was telling me, he's like, yeah, the way Medicaid is and stuff, he's like, I get like $9 a visit and and the rest goes to overhead and nonsense.
Right.
And he's like, if I could get somebody to walk in, like he'd offered me, he's like, look, if you give me $30 a visit, that's a huge win for me.
Right.
And I'll take you at that as a cash customer.
Hmm.
Cause he's like, that's better than what I'm getting with the insurance. Whereas the insurance company's billing it at like, $150 or whatever.
Right. And
And
most of that
everybody's
is through
getting
the
paid along the
insurance.
way.
Yeah.
Right. It's just
Exactly.
like nonsense.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. No, my wife had cancer a couple of
uh,
years ago, and that I think the total bills were somewhere around $300,000, a
yeah,
little bit over.
yeah,
But here's the thing though: you get cancer, that means you have to stop working. That means your health insurance is gone.
yeah,
That means you don't have the income that you had. You know,
right,
and we were lucky and able to keep the insurance, but it still, even with the
right,
insurance, it still cost us, $9,000, $10,000, you
right.
know, a year for 2 years. That's a lot of money to come out of your pocket when one of the people isn't
It's
working anymore.
insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's the thing. That's why that stuff just cripples you. And
Hmm.
and that's the thing. It becomes overwhelming where you're like, "Oh, I just can't even anymore." And like you said, if I can't pay any of my bill, or I can't pay the majority of my bills, it doesn't do me any good to pay the rest of them.
Right. Uh huh.
If you're going to let that shit burn, you may as well burn it to the ground.
Exactly.
That's how it is. But no, I appreciate you guys watching this, and it's awesome if you like and subscribe, like the video, subscribe to the channel. That really helps us out. If you listening on the podcast, if you would go ahead and maybe leave a review wherever you download it, we appreciate that. A lot of them
Yeah,
don't
the
even really
reviews are
do
real
that
big if you
anymore.
guys.
It does
Yeah,
help though.
reviews are real big if you can find some place to leave a review.
Yeah, exactly. That's how it plays out. You have thoughts, concerns, things you want to email us about, questions. You like what we're doing, you don't like what we're doing, let us know. We can maybe shape the world into a better place. We all want to get better, right? So with that, I would say stay safe and we will talk to you guys next week.